Longtime fans of this channel will know that I am a huge fan of Earthbound, a quirky RPG that set itself apart from its contemporaries by having a modern setting and having a good sense of humor throughout. But as I sit, replaying this classic about psychic children saving the world from aliens, I'm starting to notice a few things that I have questions about, like the first boss, Frank, leader of the Sharks, a street gang that patrols the hometown of Ness. He apparently has some kind of plan to take over the world with a wooden robot he's assembled. My question is, how old is Frank meant to be here? He seems to have some kind of engineering expertise, as he's able to build a robot, even if he did it out of very strange materials. And looking at his sprite in the boss fight, it appears as though he has a receding hairline. But at the same time, he's leading a gang of teenagers, and there's not really a way to interpret that doesn't come off at least a little creepy. But then to add even more confusion to this, after you finish the game, you can come back and talk to him, and he'll actually state that he's still underage, which really just leads to more questions. But moving on. After you wrap up everything in Ness's hometown, you move on to Tucson. And here we find one of the game's more pointless mechanics. You can get a bike for Ness to ride around on. This will make him move around the map a lot quicker, which is great, but unfortunately there's a catch. You can only use the bike outside, fair enough, and you can only use it when Ness is alone. So once Paula joins your party, the bike becomes completely useless. But even before that, you can get teddy bears to act as just dummies in your party to absorb damage. And you can't ride the bike if you have a teddy bear following you. And the bicycle takes up an inventory slot, and your inventory in Earthbound is extremely limited, so space is at a very high premium. So I truly am at a loss as to why the bicycle was even included in this game. As even in the brief time when you could hypothetically use it, it's really putting you at a disadvantage to do so. Earlier I mentioned Paula joining Ness and completely destroying any use the bicycle may have had. Before she joins you, you have to fight a cult. The cult of happyism. I just have one question about this cult, because they're not in Tucson, they're in a little tiny village, which they apparently own, Happy Village. And when you enter their main compound, you will see that there is a rather impressive number of members. But I'm just curious, where did all these members come from exactly? The village is very small, with very few buildings. The nearest city would of course be Tucson, but they don't seem to have any kind of presence there doing recruiting or any such. So how does this cult have this many members? I know they're being mind-controlled by a statue, but they'd have to actually get to the statue first. And once you fight their leader, apparently the mind control is instantly broken, and most of them are just gone. And I'm just curious, where did all these members come from? And then where did they go so quickly? But regardless, after this, you can go save Paula, find another important location, and then you can go save the Blues Brothers. I mean the Runaway 5. Maybe we'll talk about them some other time. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. Okay, so in Earthbound, once you finish dealing with the cult and recruiting Paula, you go back to Tucson because you still need to save the Runaway 5. Because there's ghosts in the tunnel leading to the next town, and apparently only their music can keep the ghosts at bay. Which does make me wonder if they've never actually had an album. Because it was the 90s, so it seems like a stereo CD player could have just been held by Ness as he walked through the tunnel. But we actually need to help them. And it turns out that the guy in charge of all the crime in Tucson that you beat up earlier, rather than seek revenge on Ness, hands him the exact amount of money that's needed to bail out the Runaway 5 from their bad contract. That's a little overly nice and very convenient. And if this were a one-time occurrence, I could kind of forgive it. But you encounter the Runaway 5 later in the story, and they have yet again fallen under a bad contract and need to be bailed out. Did they learn absolutely nothing from the first experience? But putting that aside, they take you to the next town, Threed. A town where the dead have risen in the form of ghosts, zombies, and various possessed things. And it seems just a little odd that the rest of the world does not care that there's a town under attack from the undead. It seems like, at the very least, that would be a concern to neighboring towns, if not a national or even worldwide news event. But oddly, everyone seems pretty calm with the situation. Yeah, the people in Threed are a little worried, but no one's given in to like full-on religious hysteria over the dead rising. It's also in this town, there's something really weird you need to do, where as Ness and Paula, you have to follow a woman into a hotel room where you're ambushed and captured. And there are no good implications for two teenagers following someone into a hotel room. But this has to happen because that's where we meet our third party member, Jeff. And thankfully, unlike Paula, he actually gets his own short solo adventure, so you can kind of level him up a little bit. He doesn't have any innate psychic powers like our other two characters thus far. He just uses a lot of items that only he can use in combat. His solo adventure involves having a pet monkey briefly, riding atop the Loch Ness Monster, and piloting a UFO to crash into where Ness and Paula are being held. And now that he's with you, and you're no longer being held prisoner, you can fight an evil tent to get some fly honey. I am honestly curious what this stuff is supposed to be, as flies do absolutely not produce honey. And then keep the zombies at bay by putting tape down on the floor. Apparently zombies just can't handle adhesive surfaces. Then of course, we're off to Saturn Valley. But we'll talk about that and the Mr. Saturns later. That's gonna take some explaining. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. So, we get to Saturn Valley. It's named Saturn Valley because the Mr. Saturns live there. And ever since this game was first released, I've been wondering, what exactly are Mr. Saturns supposed to be? They are these little creatures that are just a head and a pair of feet. They're sort of like if Meatwad was covered in skin. And when you talk to them, they have a unique font for their dialogue. I assume this means their voice has a very distinct quality. When I was a kid playing this, I assumed they had like a cartoon dumb guy voice, or perhaps a very heavy accent that you couldn't quite place. But apparently, the font in question is supposed to look like a child's first attempt at writing. So is that supposed to mean that all of these little heads with feet sound like children? And beyond that, are these things even actually human? Are they meant to be some kind of friendly alien? As we don't encounter any other friendly aliens in this game. And to further confuse all of this, these things are apparently very advanced scientifically, as they play an important role towards the end of the game, which we will talk about some other time. And there are no real answers to be found about Mr. Saturns in this game. They exist, and they are very bizarre, and that's all we know. But anyway, you're here with the Mr. Saturns because they are having a problem. And their problem is also kind of your problem. There is an anthropomorphic pile of puke that is harassing the Mr. Saturns, and also responsible for the undead rising in Threed. And he seems intimidating, but you just throw the fly honey at him, which he apparently loves, and the fight's pretty much over. And I still don't know what fly honey is, and I'm not sure that I want to know. But after you're done with him, you get to take a little bath in a hot spring, and you get to enjoy a nice cup of coffee. At which point, you see one of the more unique elements of Earthbound. While your characters sip the coffee, the game sort of sums up what's been going on. But it's not really talking to your characters, it's more the game talking to you, the player. And as strange as it is, it's kind of endearing at the same time. But after the fourth wall breaking is over, you get to go and get another shiny spot. Which really, shiny spots, despite being the point of the game, are far and away the least memorable part of this game. But then we go back to Threed and we'll be moving on. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. So, as we leave Threed, we enter the filler-tastic portion of Earthbound, which is pretty much everything concerning the city of Fourside. Between the two cities, there is a desert. And your first time in the desert, you will encounter a traffic jam, something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the game. And as you were the only people leaving Threed, it makes very little sense that this exists at all. There's literally just one road that connects Tucson, Threed, and Fourside. So, you gotta get out of the bus, and you have to walk through the desert. There are a lot of things you can interact with in the desert, but virtually none of them matter in the least. And just being in the desert will cause your characters to get sunstroke. And if you're not a high enough level, you'll have to use an item called a wet towel to heal this. Since those cost money and take up inventory slots, I recommend spending as little time as possible in the desert. The only thing you actually need to do in this desert, other than walk through it obviously, is give a guy digging some food. So now when you go back to the road, mysteriously, the traffic jam has cleared, and you can walk your way to Fourside. Here, as we discussed previously, you'll find that the Runaway Five have yet again found themselves under a terrible contract. Once you have that information, you get to go back to the desert, where that gentleman that you gave food to has excavated a huge tunnel. The problem is, there's some very aggressive moles in there. 5 to be exact. So despite him being like a burly guy that digs in the earth, he needs the help of some teenagers to clear out 5 moles. Doing this will have him give you a diamond as you're walking away. And conveniently, that diamond is worth the exact amount of the Runaway Five's current terrible contract. It's also at this point that you can find out that Pokey, Ness's one-time friend from the beginning of the game, despite being a teenager, has somehow risen to political power within Fourside. Even assuming he's getting help from the nebulous aliens that are running things, how does that work exactly? Speaking of the aliens, you get to go to the department store, which is finally open. And the only reason you go here is so Paula can get kidnapped. She was probably already the lowest level member of your party, but after she's kidnapped and you have to do a couple of things, she's definitely going to be the lowest level member of your party. So with Paula missing, you now have to go and do Moonside. In what is very clearly a bar, but the game refers to as a coffee shop, you are transported to a neon version of Fourside, Moonside. And this is sort of a 16-bit attempt at being inside a dream, I think. You get teleported around the map at certain points. You have to accomplish a very odd and kind of surreal goal to escape. And it ends with you finally getting to fight an evil statue that's showing up a few times throughout the game. And once you escape Moonside, you get to do my most hated activity in the entire game. The monkey trading sequence in the desert, which I'm not going to go into detail here because there's a whole other video all about that. But you need a lot of inventory slots, and Jeff and Ness are the 2 worst characters for inventory slots. After this, you need to try and visit Pokey again, where Ness and Jeff have to fight a robot. They can't actually win this fight. Instead, the Runaway Five come in and take care of it. I'm not sure why they decided to storm the building exactly, but they did. At which point, you'll finally have Paula back. And no, she did not level up at all during the events you had to experience without her. But it's okay, because you're gonna fix the UFO Jeff showed up on, and go to the next city. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. So you go back to 3 to investigate Jeff's UFO. Conveniently, some locals have tried to fix it, or at least painted over the damage. I'm honestly not sure that counts as repairing it, but it's alright, because apparently Jeff knows exactly what's wrong and can easily fix it. Sorta seems like this is working on a Rick and Morty kinda logic. Or I guess since this came first, I guess Rick and Morty works on a very Jeff from Earthbound kinda logic. But anyway, after a brief stop to see Jeff's estranged father, you go to Summers. It's a high-class resort town on the beach. And truthfully, there's not a huge amount to actually do here. It's mostly just a stopping point before you go to the next important place. But you do need to gain access to a very pretentious club. A club which is just looking at a rock and drinking water. The people there are very pretentious, and you're only here because there's a woman that makes, magic cakes you need to talk to. And they don't say exactly what's magic about these cakes, but it's pretty clear there's a little something extra in them. Something that might alter one's state of mind. And while Ness, Paula, and Jeff are feeling altered from the cake, we get introduced to our last party member, Prince Pooh, which is a very unfortunate name for him. He's from the Far East, but conveniently his home country uses the same money as everywhere else, and also speaks English. But putting those odd coincidences aside, Pooh is finishing up his training so he can go and meet Ness and friends. I'm not really sure why he's a prince exactly, as we never actually see a king or queen for this country. It's also strange that in his own homeland they don't sell equipment that he can use. Instead, you find all of his equipment in obscure places around the world. And when he shows up, they accept him with no questions. Now, since the prince is introduced why Ness and everyone else is altered, I'd like to pitch an idea here. And in the 30 years since this game came out, it's possible other people have thought of this. I don't know. I couldn't track down this exact line of thought, though. But what if Prince Pooh and his entire country are actually manifested by the altered minds of Paula and Ness? They are both very powerful psychics. So is it possible that neither Pooh nor his actual country exist, and he is simply a manifestation of psychic energy on the part of our other psychics? As you can go to this homeland, but when you get there, you can't see it on your map. Every other city is on there, and it is odd that they don't have their own language or currency. But putting such theories aside, once Pooh is here, we can now use one of his royal jewels to bribe a man in a museum. Once we do that, we can fight some vaguely Egyptian-themed enemies, and get the answer to a puzzle we will encounter in the next city, which you will get to by boat. But before that, this game, again, addresses the player directly, asking for your name. This might be important later, but for now, we get on a boat, and I'm sure it will be completely smooth sailing. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. So as we go sailing, we end up encountering a monster. The game refers to this sea serpent as a kraken. In most depictions, a kraken is some kind of giant cephalopod. That is to say, a octopus or a squid of some type. Admittedly, they are fictional, so they can look like whatever you want. I'm just saying you could have called it a sea serpent, or leviathan, or whatever else. But after the Kraken's defeat, we end up in Scaraba. And this place is very clearly supposed to be Cairo, Egypt. We have 3 pyramids and a sphinx. And much like in the museum, we're gonna fight some vaguely Egyptian-themed enemies. And we're also gonna lose Prince Pooh for a little bit. He's gonna go off and learn his ultimate psychic attack. Because unlike every other psychic ability, he couldn't just learn it by leveling up a little. And we now get to one of the weirder parts of Earthbound, which is saying something. We are going to go inside a man, but not a regular man. He has turned himself into a colossus that has a dungeon inside. He is the dungeon man that Jeff encountered during his solo adventure. Only now he's very literally a dungeon man. Or would man dungeon be more accurate? And after thoroughly exploring the man, he decides to follow you for a little bit. Not as a full party member, he's like the dog and pokey and picky at the beginning. That is to say, he's AI controlled and almost completely useless. But don't worry, you're not going to have him for very long. He gets stuck between some trees. Trees that honestly look like he could just knock them down with his colossal mass. But that's okay, because you need to go on to the jungle now. But for that you need to cross some water, and there is no boat this time. Instead, our friendly dungeon man offers to let you use a yellow submarine that he has in his body. It's very convenient he has that. And as to how the children actually move it out of him, we don't know. It's in him and then it's out of him. But you get to the darkest jungle, and it's a maze you have to slowly get through. And Master Belch confronts you here for round 2. He has overcome his weakness to fly honey, whatever that might be. And that talking pile of puke has gotten much stronger. But he's no match for Pooh suddenly returning with a brand new psychic attack. I guess Pooh is more powerful than Barf. And shortly thereafter, you'll find yourself at a little town in a cave, filled with some odd, not quite human creatures. It's like a less charming version of Saturn Valley, really. But we'll talk about that next time. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. Alright, so you can't do anything until this whole village overcomes their shyness. So you need to find a book on that subject. As there is only one library in the entirety of the world of Earthbound, that's pretty much where you need to start. So you go back to Ness's hometown, and you find out the library does not have the book you need. So this seems pretty pointless, but of course it's just the game making you wander about until telling you that the Apple Kid actually has this book. And of course, he's not gonna be in his house because we can't have anything be that easy. No. You're going to need to save him because he's been abducted. He is in the living rock of Stonehenge. Sadly, the game doesn't make any Spinal Tap references at this point. Now, Stonehenge is actually a pretty difficult dungeon at this point in the game. The enemies are definitely taking a step up from the last few places you've been. This is also the home of the only enemy that drops a weapon for Prince Pooh. The Golden Starmen Supers, and it's one of the few items in this game that only has a 1 in 128 drop chance. So if you're inclined to get the Sword of Kings for the Prince, one of 2 things is going to happen. Fortune smiles upon you, and you get it after only a small number of fights. It's not impossible. In my various playthroughs of this game, I've had that actually happen. However, what's far more likely to happen is you're going to grind and grind and grind on Starmen and Starmen Supers. You are going to level up to an insane degree, so much so that the rest of the game will pose absolutely no challenge to your now super-leveled characters, and after many hours you will ultimately get your Sword of Kings, which, because of your extreme leveling, will now be completely meaningless. And in reality, this isn't the only item in the game that's like this. It's just the one that stands out the most to me because it's literally the only weapon for Prince Pooh. Which, again, it kinda seems like they should have weapons for him in his own homeland. But anyway, I mention getting the Sword of Kings here because if you beat the boss of this area, you can no longer get it because all of the enemies are gone. And the boss of this area is just a very fancy-looking Starman. And once you defeat him, you actually save a bunch of people here. But the only one you care about is the Apple Kid, because he has what you need. And now, one copy of this book will miraculously be enough to cure everyone in the village of shyness, and we can finally progress. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends. So now we are approaching the end of Earthbound. This is also where the game really gives in to wild surrealism, as things are gonna go off the rails from here. As first, we find out the setting of Earthbound is apparently in a hollow world, as you delve deep into the world and find out that there are dinosaurs. The game also takes on a completely new perspective, which is incredibly odd because this area we're in right now is the only place this is used in the entire game. But we're only down here for one reason. We need to find the last spot to record the final sound for our soundstone. And I haven't talked about these locations much as I've done these. But at 8 points in the game, you fight a boss, you find a landmark, you record a sound, and then you get a nice little heartwarming message. But after you fight a nice David Bowie reference, you get the final sound you needed. You hear what they all sound like together. And then Ness gets to be trapped inside his mind for a little bit, and the visuals here get even stranger than in Moonside. And you see a lot of characters here that you've met over the course of the game. But they aren't really those characters. They're just the impression that these characters left on Ness. Who is alone here, by the way. You don't have your party members to help you. You can technically recruit a Birdman to help you here, but they aren't worth much and there's no real reason to do that. But you're here to fight the inner demons of Ness, which take the form of that Manny Manny statue you've kept running into over the course of the game. But once it's defeated, you finally get let out of your own mind. Surprisingly, none of that experience was traumatizing for Ness in any way. But now we need to go see Dr. Andonuts and the Apple Kid. They've made a machine that can take us to the final boss. But to make it work, we need to get some meteorite material. So guess what? We need to backtrack to the first part of the game. And Ness's hometown is now under attack. And it's kind of a missed opportunity here. It would have been interesting to see like Frank and the Sharks trying to fight off the aliens. Maybe an updated version of Frank's robot we fought earlier. Instead, everyone's just trapped in their houses scared. And we just need to walk right up to the meteor, grab what we need, and then we can leave. Not actually resolving the problem of the town being under attack. But I guess the town doesn't matter because we have the fuel to make the machine take us to the last boss. Only now, at this last second, we're told that our bodies can't actually make the trip. Ness and his friends need to be turned into machines. They need to literally give up their humanity in order to fight an inhuman menace. Weirdly, this transition doesn't affect your character's stats at all. You would think since you're robots that all of your stats could just be maxed, at least your physical ones. In this area leading up to the boss, there's another item like Pooh's sword you can get here if you want to grind. It's Ness's ultimate weapon. I have never bothered to try and farm for it. Ness has many fine weapons to choose from already. But now, at long last, we get to fight Gygas. And Porky is here in a weird spider tank thing too. At a certain point during this fight, all hope seems lost. And your only way to finish it is to have Paula pray. Repeatedly. This is so that all of the friends you've made along the way can give you their strength to finally finish Gygas. I guess someone on the team can use the spirit bomb. And with the alien menace taken care of, conveniently Ness and friends all go back into their bodies somehow. And at this point the game is basically over. You can, however, wander around and talk to people and find little interesting tidbits if you're so inclined. And honestly, this game's ending is kind of mundane considering how strange everything leading up to it was. But that is the nonsense of Earthbound. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.